What we're looking at here is a message that was literally born from chaos. This is not some calm, dusty theological document. It's an emergency dispatch sent to a brand new community that was already in a full-blown crisis. It's actually one of the earliest Christian writings we have, and it tells this incredible story of a faith that was forged in the fire of persecution, confusion, and some really deep-seated grief.
So to really get this letter, you have to understand the journey that led to it. This map here shows the Apostle Paul's second missionary trip. See his path right here, winding through Macedonia? He shows up in this bustling Roman capital, Thessalonica. And get this, he's just come from being arrested and physically beaten in the last town, Philippi. His time in Thessalonica is going to be short, it's going to be intense, and it's going to end, well, violently.
The backstory for this letter is just pure chaos. So Paul and his team, they limp into Thessalonica fresh out of jail. For just a few weeks, they preach and somehow manage to plant a brand new church. But their success makes some people furious and a mob is stirred up. Paul and his partner Silas have to literally flee for their lives in the middle of the night. Later, Paul is in Athens, all alone and just eaten up with worry about these new believers. He can't take it anymore, so he sends his young protege Timothy on the dangerous journey all the way back to check on this tiny, new, persecuted church. Okay, so here's how we're going to break all of this down. We'll start with that really dangerous beginning and the crisis the church was up against. Then, we'll dive into Paul's letter of encouragement, his instructions for living a worthy life, and yes, we are going to unpack that really famous section on the rapture. And we'll wrap it all up by looking at the letter's powerful message of enduring hope. So let's jump in with that dangerous start. You have to remember, this church wasn't born in some peaceful, quiet time. It was born in the middle of a conflict, with its founders literally getting chased out of town by an angry mob. And that violent beginning leads directly to the crisis we're talking about. See, Timothy eventually makes his way back to Paul, who is now in Corinth, and he brings this urgent report. This entire letter, every single word, is Paul's direct, heartfelt response to the troubling news Timothy delivered. So, what on earth was in that report? What was going on? Why were these new Christians who'd been left behind in Thessalonica so deeply worried? Timothy's report was just a laundry list of anxieties. First off, they were facing intense persecution from everyone around them. At the same time, critics were spreading rumors that Paul was a total fraud, just a con man trying to get rich. They were also grieving because some people in their little community had died, and they were terrified that these loved ones had somehow missed out on Jesus' return. On top of that, they were confused about how to actually live this new faith, and they were being tempted by all their old pagan habits. And the final straw? Some of them had just quit their jobs, thinking the world was about to end anyway, so why bother working? This church was right on the edge of falling apart. So how in the world does Paul respond to all of that? Well, this is absolutely crucial. He doesn't start by scolding them or listing off all their mistakes. He starts with encouragement. He just showers them with powerful, affirming praise. Just look at this strategy here. He tells this struggling, anxious group that their faith isn't just surviving, it's thriving. He says the news about them has echoed forth, that they've become an example for the whole region. Before he corrects anything, he's reminding them that even in the middle of all their suffering, they are a powerful beacon of hope. It's brilliant. Okay, next he tackles those personal attacks, the slander against his own character. The accusation was that he was just a smooth talker, a con artist in it for the money. Paul's defense is so personal. He basically says, come on, you guys know me. Just remember how I acted when I was there with you. Did he use flattery? Did he ask for money? No. He reminds them that he worked with his own hands, night and day, probably making tents, specifically so he wouldn't be a financial burden on anyone. He says he treated them like a gentle nursing mother and a caring father, sharing not just the message, but his very self with them. Okay, so once he's affirmed their faith and defended his own integrity, Paul pivots. He moves into really practical instructions. He starts to show them how to translate that faith into their day-to-day lives. How to actually live a life that's worthy of this new calling they have. And the core idea right here is sanctification. Now, that's a big theological-sounding word, but what it means is actually pretty simple. Paul says it plainly. This is God's will for you. It's about becoming the person you were created to be, a life that's set apart from all those old destructive habits and is instead dedicated to God. That's the goal he's pointing them toward. And his advice for reaching this really lofty goal is surprisingly, down to earth. To deal with the chaos of people quitting their jobs because they thought the world was ending, he gives 3 simple commands. 1, lead a quiet life. 2, mind your own business. And 3,
work with your hands. In a community that's all hyped up about the apocalypse, this was a radical call to just calm down and get back to civility and personal responsibility.
Now, this next point from Paul was a big one, and this quote really helps us understand why. He warns them pretty strongly against sexual immorality. And this quote from the Greek orator Demosthenes shows you the cultural air they were breathing. In the Greco-Roman world, it was totally normal and socially acceptable for men to have wives, mistresses, and prostitutes. So when Paul comes in teaching that each person should control their own body in holiness and honor, man, that was completely and utterly countercultural.
So this brings us to what is probably the most famous and maybe the most misunderstood part of the whole letter, the passage that describes what many people today call the rapture. But it is so important to see that this wasn't some abstract theological lesson. It was a direct pastoral response to the community's very real grief and anxiety. The heart of the matter was this absolutely gut-wrenching question from the Thessalonians. They were living every day expecting Jesus to return at any moment. But then, some of their friends and family died. And their biggest fear was, oh no, did they miss out? Are we ever going to see them again? Paul's answer is just this profound message of hope and reunion. He tells them, look, when the Lord returns, those of us who are still alive will not go on ahead of those who have died. No, instead, we will be suddenly caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. So the most important point here isn't about an escape, it's about a reunion. The central promise is so simple and powerful, and so we will always be with the Lord. And to make it crystal clear, Paul lays out a very specific sequence of events. First, he says, the Lord himself will descend from heaven. It's going to be loud, a shout, an angel's voice, the trumpet of God. Then, and this is the key part for his grieving friends, the believers who have already died will rise first. Only after that happens will the living be caught up to join them. So how does this one event fit into a bigger picture? Well, this diagram shows one very common way of understanding it, which is known as the pre-tribulation rapture. In this view, believers are caught up or removed from the earth before a difficult period called the tribulation. Then, that period is followed by what the Bible calls Jesus' second coming to earth. The logic here is that believers are promised salvation from God's wrath, not that they'll have to endure. And this table is really helpful for clearing up something that often gets confusing within that way of thinking. People who hold this view make a clear distinction between the rapture and the second coming. So as you can see, they see the rapture as saints going up to meet the Lord in the air. The second coming, on the other hand, is when the saints come back down with the Lord to the earth. One is a catching up for believers, the other is a public return to judge and to reign. So, after digging through all the context, the crises, the practical advice, and the complex theology, what's the letter's enduring hope? What's the real takeaway from this urgent, ancient message, and what could it possibly mean for us today? After he's addressed all their specific fears, Paul just boils down God's will for them into these direct, actionable commands. Rejoice always. Pray constantly. In everything, give thanks. He tells them, don't put out the Spirit's fire, but test everything, hold on to what's good, and just stay away from every kind of evil. This is really the practical, rubber-meets-the-road core of a life of faith. And then, Paul ends with this ultimate reassurance. I mean, he's just given them this incredibly high calling. Live a holy life, endure persecution, hold on to hope. But he wants them to know that it's not all on their shoulders. The God who called them in the first place is faithful, and he's the one who will see it all through to the end. And that really just leaves us with this final question. The Thessalonians, they faced persecution, they faced grief, they faced profound uncertainty about the future. In a world that often feels just as anxious and unpredictable, what does this ancient message of steadfast hope, of practical, everyday faith, and of an ultimate reunion, what does that mean for us right here, right now?